Oh yes, I know, I know. Functions can be tough, but hopefully that one was an easy one and they can pause the video and always ask me some questions in the comments. Oh, hey, we're on. So today we're talking about a array in JavaScript. So let's create a simple bare bones array. We'll probably create maybe one or two and try to iterate over them using a nice little for loop. Don't worry about that, but it'll probably make sense when you see it, and it can be pretty intimidating as well. But I'm here for you. I'm here for you. Don't worry. Don't worry. Okay, so open up your favorite text editor and we'll begin with arrays, a simple type of array. So what we have here is a simple array comment here, but let's actually just take a look and see what we have, because I do believe you had a sneak peek of what an array actually looks like. So let's say we want an array of, let's say shopping list. Shopping list, yeah, we can do that. A shopping list array. Here's an empty array. There's no elements in it, and we are using these open and close here. And we're gonna fill that. We're gonna fill that with, let's say, apples, and separate it by a comma. And we're going to say, what else do we want? We want some milk. And one more thing. Let's see if you can guess what it's going to be. It is candy. All right. Pretty sure that's what you were going to guess. All right, so now what do we have here? We are defining this array with the name of shopping list. Okay, not too bad. Now, what happens if we try to console log that? I mean, if we run this, let's see if we try to, let's see that, and node, and what is the name of it? Intro.js. Nothing happens there. Let's see if we try to actually log anything out. Console.log shopping list. Let's see what we get here. Okay, all right, so our an actual array actually so it does show up. All right, but now let's iterate over it. Let's go line for line and iterate over the actual function, or not the function, the actual array. So, and how would we do that? Now this was going to get a little scary. There are a number of array methods that can be used to iterate, or basically go through, walk yourself or step through the array elements, in which in this case, as I back up a second, is the first item here. So the first item here, that is what is known as index 1. So when you're in JavaScript, when you're actually working with arrays, all right, each element inside the array has an index value, and the index in JavaScript starts at 0. So if, for example, I wanted to say console.log the first element, I can say shopping list, open the bracket, put in a 0, because 0, again, the indexes start at 0. All right, so this would be 0, 1, and this would be element 2. Or so 0, 1, 2. And that's just referring to, again, the index. So now, if I were to run that, okay, we see apples. If I were to actually copy the same thing, and I want it to print out, and again, you see I have the semicolon or not. You don't necessarily need those anymore, but it's, I'm just so used to it, so I'll continue with it. But let's say I copy this here, and I want to print out the last element there, which is candy. So I know the indexes start at 0, so it would be 0, 1, 2. So in this case, I would put the index of 2 inside the brackets. And now I'll run that, and we see candy. Okay. All right. So that is just kind of going through the actual, the actual index itself, or the actual array. But let's say we wanted to not do that and just kind of iterate the whole thing and print everything out. Now, this is going to be a little scary, but let's hold hands on this one. I'm going to say for. Okay, for what? So usually when we're doing a for loop, we, and don't worry if this doesn't make too much sense, because we will actually have a video on loops, different types of loops. But again, it's good to kind of say, you know what, I seen it in the array video. So then when you do actually see it when we cover loops, you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute, I've seen that already. So we're going to create a variable inside our loop, and it's going to say, and we're just going to say let I equal 0. Okay, so that's our initializer. That's saying, you know what, in this, for this array, we're going to start our iterator of I at 0. We're initializing I at 0. And, you know, we're going to actually run through this. So we're starting at 0, and then we're going to use something called, if I actually comment this out, before I actually use that, let's see what happens if we do a console.log shopping list dot length. Okay, so now what we're using is a property here that's going to allow allow us to actually see how many things are actually in the shopping list. So if I run that, it does say 3. Okay, so the shopping list dot length gives us 3, and if I add in an item in here, and let's say soda, okay, so now we see that there's 4 things in there. Okay, so now if I run that, we should get a 4 in the output, which we do because the shopping list dot length is 4 items. So now going back to the loop, I can then say we want to run this that many times. So while I is less than the shopping list dot length, okay, I know your heart's starting to pound a little bit, but you know, just bear with me. Okay, so now we're starting at 0, and we're going to run this all the way up until the shopping list dot length, which is 4, and then we're going to increment I. Okay, so we're going to increment I by using these 2 plus signs, in which that says, you know what, each time we iterate through this loop, we're going to increase I by 1. Okay, and then from there, we'll be able to console.log. But you know what? Before we even console.log anything, let's take a look at what I actually is, because now we're going through this loop. All right, and then these things can be a little weird, and this is why I like to console log a lot of things out. So if I run this, now what happens is I get 0, 1, 2, 3. And that just tells me that every time I kept running through this loop, I started at 0, and then it was incremented by 1, and then it went to the next index, the next index, the next index, and the next index. And why did it go to the next index? Because we said increase by 1, or at least not necessarily the next index, but in this case, we actually just printed out each value of I. All right, and I was represented 4 times because the length of the array was 4. Now, that's a lot to absorb, but don't worry, we'll have a whole separate video on different types of loops and much easier ways to iterate through an array. And just to kind of showcase that we keep jumping into this loop a number of different times, or at least the amount of times that the dot length value is, let's console.log. We are in the loop running. Okay, and now let's see what we get. Let's just clear this out and run it. And we are in the loop running. I is 0. We are in the loop running. I is 1. In the loop running, I is 2, and so forth. Okay, so now with that nasty for loop, okay, and again, you know, we'll have a whole separate video for these actual for loops, but this is a standard way for you to have under your belt how to iterate through an actual array. And what we're going to do here is say, let's console.log. What are we going to log out? The shopping list. And we're going to use the bracket and the I. And the reason for that is this is going to be equivalent to saying this at the bottom here. This is going to be like saying, you know what, for the shopping list, I want you to print out I at the value of 0, which is the index of 0, and I want you to print out the value of the actual array at index 1, and actually going through, well, let's just copy that as I keep typing here. Okay, And so now we have 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and the output that we had here for I was 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this line here is equivalent to this right here. And again, we're going to go through this loop 4 times because that's the length of the actual array. And of course, I'm repeating these self over and over, but don't, again, the reason for that is arrays can be scary and crazy, but this is the bare bones of the actual loop itself, the actual loop and the actual array. So let's actually comment this out because we don't need that, and let's run it. And there we have it: apples, milk, candy, soda. So we definitely iterated through that. And if we wanted to actually, make this look slightly prettier, let's say, let's say this is our list. In our list, how do we want to do that? We can say, just trying to print out some junk here. We'll have string. Let's get an actual value here. Right? This is our item. We can do that. Oh, item at index. Index what? Index I. At index 1. Yeah, I think that'll work. And let's put a little space in here. And we'll get rid of this because we don't need that. And I think that'll be fine. So this is our item at index. And again, I will be incremented. So we should be able to see that as well. So let's clear this out and then run it. And this is our, oh, we don't have a space in there, even though I thought we did. Okay, we can add a space here. And we'll actually show you how to use some template literals here, which will make printing out values and strings a little bit easier. But let's run this, and now we have some space. So this is our item at index 0, which it does match up with the apples, and our item at index 1, which is the second element in the array, and 2 and 3. So I think that's enough for getting our big toe wet for the actual arrays itself. I think what I was going to do is actually come up with another array, but I think I'll leave that for you. So we'll say let numbers equal an element of numbers, and there is a simple one, and we'll let you iterate through that. So for your practice, iterate through this array and play around with console logging something out to the terminal, or you can do it in your browser. And just practice logging things out, iterate through it, and maybe you can even, as a bonus, maybe add those values together as well. Okay, so subscribe to the channel, comment if you have any questions, like, comment, subscribe, the standard phrases for YouTube. And I think that's it for today. Yeah. All right, so pat yourself on the back. This was Arrays, getting your feet wet with Arrays. Introduction. Stack out.